September 14th, 2019. The day I thought was going to be the happiest of my life. My wedding day. You know how people say weddings are filled with love, laughter, and family blessings? Well, mine was, until my father leaned into me, just as I was about to walk down the aisle, and whispered words that still echo in my head. He didn't say, "I'm proud of you." He didn't say, "You look beautiful." No. He whispered, "You'll regret this marriage." And the worst part? My husband heard every single word. Now, before you think this is just another bitter family story, let me warn you. This wasn't just about pride or jealousy. What happened after that whisper ripped my marriage, my family, and even my sense of truth apart. I'll tell you everything. But first, if you enjoy stories that start sweet and end in shadows, with secrets hiding in plain sight, then make sure you hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, because trust me, this is only the beginning. I can still remember my heartbeat in that moment. Everyone in the church was smiling, clapping, waiting for me to step forward. And there I was, frozen. Should I smile back and pretend nothing happened? Or should I confront the man who raised me, right in front of my new husband? What would you do? If the very first words of your marriage weren't, "I love you, but you'll regret this"? They say fathers are a daughter's first protectors. Mine, he was more like a judge, always watching, always testing, never letting his guard down. Growing up, I thought that was normal. He wanted me to be strong, cautious, careful with people. But as I got older, I realized his caution often felt more like control. Every friend I brought home was not good enough. Every boy I liked was trouble, and every decision I made was somehow wrong in his eyes. So, when I introduced him to Daniel, the man I would later marry, I already knew what was coming. The look on my dad's face told me everything. He didn't even have to speak. He thought Daniel was just another mistake waiting to happen. Funny thing is, Daniel was nothing like the men my dad warned me about. He was steady, patient, the kind of man who didn't need to shout to prove a point. We met at work, sharing late nights on a project that seemed to go on forever. I'd bring coffee. He'd bring that calm smile of his. One conversation led to another, and soon, I realized I wasn't just looking forward to the end of the project. I was looking forward to him. And yet, from the moment I told my dad about Daniel, the storm began. He's not ambitious enough. He wants something from you. You're too blinded by love to see the truth. Maybe if you heard those words once or twice, you'd brush them off. But hearing them over and over again, from the man who raised you, plants a seed. It makes you doubt what you feel. But Daniel, he never backed down. He showed up for me in ways no one else ever had. When my dad picked fights, Daniel stayed calm. When I cried over the tension at home, Daniel would hold me and whisper, "We'll get through this. Just us." That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to let my father's doubts control my life anymore. For once I wanted to choose love over fear. So when Daniel proposed, I said yes without hesitation. My dad's reaction? He didn't congratulate us. He didn't smile. He just went silent, like a man waiting for a disaster he knew was coming. In the months leading up to the wedding, the tension only grew. My mom tried to play peacekeeper, assuring me, "He'll come around. It's just a father thing." But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about being overprotective. My dad had this way of looking at Daniel, like he was staring straight through him, like he was certain of something I couldn't see. And yet, despite all the warnings, all the cold stares, I held on to one belief. Once the wedding day came, once my dad saw how much Daniel and I loved each other, he'd let it go. He'd finally give us his blessing. I wish I could tell you I was right, but that's the thing about fathers like mine. When they believe something, they hold on to it with iron fists. And instead of giving me a blessing, he chose that moment, the biggest moment of my life, to plant a curse. That whisper at the altar. It wasn't random. It was the climax of years of doubt, control, and unspoken battles, and what came after proved he might not have been just warning me. He might have been predicting something. The morning of my wedding should have felt like a dream. And for a while it did. The white dress, the flowers, the laughter of bridesmaids bustling around me. It was everything I thought I'd ever wanted. But even as I smiled for pictures and sipped champagne, there was this strange weight pressing down on me. You know that feeling when the room is loud but you can still hear silence under it all? That was my father's silence. He was there, suit pressed, tie perfect. But he wasn't celebrating. Not really. He smiled for the camera, yes, but his eyes, they told a different story. They were searching, calculating, almost like he was waiting for the moment everything would collapse. I tried to brush it off. After all, weddings are stressful for parents too, right? But little things kept slipping through the cracks. Like when my maid of honor caught him standing alone outside the church smoking in silence, something he hadn't done in years. Or when I overheard him asking the officiant, "Are you sure everything's in order?" in a tone that sounded less like a father and more like an investigator. And yet, everyone else seemed blind to it. My mom was glowing. My friends were chattering about the reception. Daniel's family was buzzing with excitement. To them, it was just a wedding day. To me, it felt like the air was charged, like lightning waiting to strike. Daniel noticed too. Before the ceremony, he pulled me aside. His hand was warm on mine, his voice steady. "Ignore him. Today's about us." I nodded, but inside I was breaking. How could I ignore the man who had shaped my entire life, who now stood at the edge of my happiness like a shadow? Then came the walk down the aisle. The music swelled, everyone turned, and my father took my arm. To the crowd, it must have looked picture perfect, a proud dad giving away his daughter. But in reality, his grip was tight, almost rigid, like he wasn't leading me forward but holding me back. And that's when I felt it. That chill, the one you can't explain, the one that crawls up your spine when something is about to happen. I told myself I was imagining it, that once we reached the altar, everything would settle. But I was wrong, because it wasn't the vows or the kiss or the first dance that left the deepest mark on my wedding day. It was what happened right there, halfway down that aisle, when my father leaned in close, his lips barely moving, his voice sharp enough to cut through the music. "You'll regret this marriage." And the man waiting at the altar, my husband, heard it all. The aisle felt endless. Every step echoed like thunder in my chest. Guests leaned in, smiling, whispering to each other. Cameras flashed. But in my world, there was only one sound. The steady breath of my father beside me. And then, halfway down, it happened. He leaned closer, so close I could feel the warmth of his breath on my ear. His lips barely moved, but his words were sharper than any blade. "You'll regret this marriage." 3 words. That's all it took to shatter me. I froze. My smile faltered, just for a second. But in that second, the room spun. My stomach dropped. My knees almost buckled under the weight of those words. I wanted to believe I had misheard him, that nerves were twisting my mind. But no. The tone, the certainty in his voice, it was unmistakable. And before I could even process what he had said, I saw Daniel's face at the altar. He had heard. His jaw tightened. His eyes, once soft with joy, narrowed ever so slightly. I could feel his stare piercing through me, not out of anger, at least not yet, but out of confusion. A silent question burned in his gaze. Why would your father say that? My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure the guests could hear it. Yet everyone else seemed blissfully unaware, clapping softly, smiling as though nothing had happened. The world went on, while mine had just collapsed. Do you know that awful moment when two worlds collide? The life you want and the life you're running from? That's exactly what it felt like. On one side of me was Daniel, waiting, trusting. On the other side was my father, holding my arm like a chain, whispering doom into my ear. And me? I was caught in the middle, paralyzed, a bride torn between love and blood. I told myself to keep walking, to plaster the smile back on, to act as if nothing had happened. Because if I faltered now, if I let the truth of that whisper show, the whole day would unravel. But inside, a storm had begun, and storms have a way of breaking through, no matter how hard you try to hold them back. I don't even remember the rest of the walk down the aisle. My body moved, but my mind was trapped inside those words. You'll regret this marriage. They looped over and over, echoing louder than the music, louder than the vows waiting ahead. When we reached Daniel, my father placed my hand in his grip stiff, reluctant, and then stepped back, as if he had just delivered a warning and washed his hands of the outcome. Daniel's fingers closed around mine, steady, warm. But I could feel the question pulsing through his touch. Why would your father say that? I tried to smile, tried to keep my lips from trembling as the officiant began speaking. My voice wavered on the vows, and I saw Daniel watching me more closely than he watched the words we were repeating. His eyes weren't just filled with love anymore. They were clouded with suspicion. The ceremony went on, but my father's shadow lingered. Every time I glanced at the crowd, his face stood out. Calm, almost satisfied. It wasn't the face of a man giving away his daughter. It was the face of a man who believed he'd just proven himself right. The kiss came. The applause. The pictures. Everyone cheered. But my chest was tight, as though I were carrying a secret no one else could see. At the reception, the tension grew heavier. The music played, glasses clinked, and laughter spilled across the hall. But Daniel stayed quiet. Too quiet. Even when his friends tried to pull him into jokes or conversations, his smile looked forced. And when we finally had a moment alone, he didn't waste time. He leaned close, his voice low but sharp. I heard what he said. My stomach dropped. I opened my mouth, but no words came. What could I possibly say? That I didn't know why my father whispered that? That maybe he was just trying to protect me? Even I wasn't sure. Daniel's eyes burned into mine. Does he know something I don't? I shook my head quickly. Too quickly. No, he's always been this way. But even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded. Daniel studied me for a moment longer before nodding, but I could tell. He didn't believe me. He wasn't angry yet, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and my father had watered it with poison. The rest of the night blurred into a haze of forced smiles and hollow laughter. Every time Daniel reached for my hand, I wondered if he was holding me out of love or out of suspicion. Every time my father raised his glass, I wondered if he was toasting my happiness or my downfall. When the music finally faded and the guests began to leave, I thought maybe the weight would lift. But in the quiet of our wedding night, when Daniel closed the door behind us, the silence wasn't romantic. It was heavy, suffocating. He sat down, loosening his tie, and finally asked the question I'd been dreading since the moment the whisper left my father's lips. Why would your father tell you? You'll regret marrying me? And in that moment I realized this wasn't just about a whisper anymore. It was about trust, about whether the man I had chosen would believe in me or believe in the man who raised me. The wedding was over, but the real test of my marriage had just begun. The first days after the wedding should have been golden. Honeymoon bliss, lazy mornings, promises whispered in the dark. But ours began with silence. Not the comfortable kind. The heavy kind, where words are trapped because no one dares to speak them. Daniel didn't bring up my father's whisper again immediately, but I could feel it hanging between us. Every time his phone buzzed, every time he stepped out of the room, I wondered if he was thinking about it. If he was questioning me, and I'll be honest, I started questioning myself. You see, my father wasn't just a man of opinions. He was a man of patterns. He had warned me about friends who later betrayed me. He had told me certain coworkers were liars, and months later, he was proven right. He always seemed to see things before they happened. So what if? What if he saw something in Daniel I was too blind to see? The thought ate at me. I loved my husband, but my father's words clung to my mind like a curse. I replayed old arguments between them, times when Daniel brushed off my dad's suspicions with a polite smile. Times when my father would mutter afterward, "He's hiding something." One night, just a week after the wedding, Daniel finally broke the silence. "Do you think your father knows something about me?" he asked. His tone wasn't angry, but it wasn't gentle either. My heart clenched. I wanted to say no, to defend him without hesitation. But the pause, the single second of hesitation, was enough. His eyes darkened. He saw it. He felt it. That's how poison works. It doesn't need to kill you instantly. It just needs to make you doubt. From then on, small cracks began to form. Daniel grew sharper, less patient. I grew quieter, walking on eggshells, terrified that any wrong move would prove my father right. And my father? He stayed silent. He didn't need to repeat his warning. He had already planted the seed, and now he was just waiting, watching it grow. Was he protecting me, trying to save me from some truth I hadn't discovered yet? Or was he manipulating me, jealous of losing his hold over me? That question haunted me. Because one thing was certain. Whether my father was right or wrong, his whisper had already done its damage. And the truth was coming. It was late, 2 weeks after the wedding, when the dam finally broke. Daniel and I had been circling each other in silence, both of us carrying questions we were too afraid to ask out loud. But that night, as we sat in the living room surrounded by half-packed honeymoon gifts we hadn't even touched, he turned to me with eyes that were no longer patient. "Enough," he said. "Tell me the truth. Why would your father say I'll ruin your life?" His words sliced through the quiet, sharp, and final. I wanted to defend him, to protect the fragile love we had. But another voice rang in my head. My father's voice, cold and certain. "You'll regret this marriage." And then Daniel added something that froze my blood. "Has he told you something about me? About my past?" My heart slammed in my chest. Past? What past? I had never questioned Daniel's story, never dug deeper. He had always seemed so steady, so open. But the way he asked that question, it was as if he feared the answer himself. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Is there something I should know?" I asked. My voice shook, but my eyes stayed locked on his. He looked away. And that silence told me more than words ever could. Finally, he spoke. "Years ago before you, I made mistakes, business deals, people I shouldn't have trusted. I thought it was buried. Maybe your father found out." My stomach twisted. Mistakes? Deals? What did that even mean? Fraud? Debt? Lies? I wanted details, but the way he said it, the shame in his voice, told me enough. My father's warning hadn't come from nowhere. Later, when I confronted my dad, his response was chilling. He didn't gloat, didn't shout. He just looked at me and said, "I told you, a man's past is his shadow, and shadows don't disappear just because you close your eyes." That's when I realized the whisper wasn't just a father's bitterness. It was a revelation, one he had delivered in the most cruel, calculated way possible. And now, I was standing at a crossroads. Do I stay, holding on to love tainted with secrets? Or do I believe the man who raised me, who had been right more times than I wanted to admit? The whisper that started as a warning was now a prophecy, and the choice I made next would decide if it came true. People think weddings end with a kiss, a dance, and a happily ever after. But mine ended with a whisper. A whisper that grew louder with every passing day, until it wasn't just in my head anymore, it was in my marriage. I tried for a while to pretend I could separate the two. That Daniel's love and my father's warning could exist in different corners of my heart. But the truth? They bled together. Every look Daniel gave me, every silence between us, was colored by that single moment. And here's the cruelest part. I don't even know if my father wanted to protect me or destroy me. Maybe he truly saw something in Daniel that I couldn't. Or maybe he simply wanted to remind me that his voice would always matter more than my choices. In the end, does it even make a difference? Because the damage was done. Daniel confessed to mistakes, yes, but nothing illegal, nothing unforgivable. Just shadows of a younger man who made poor choices. But by then, forgiveness didn't feel so simple. Not because of what he had done, but because of the doubt that had already taken root. Doubt planted by my father, watered by my silence, and grown in the soil of mistrust. You see, regret doesn't always arrive as a disaster. Sometimes it sneaks in slowly, whisper by whisper, until one day you wake up and realize you no longer trust the person sleeping beside you. That's what my father's words did to me. They didn't destroy my marriage in one blow. They poisoned it drop by drop. And so, when I look back on my wedding day, I don't just remember the flowers or the music or the kiss. I remember the weight of a hand on my arm, the warmth of breath at my ear, and the voice of the man who raised me, cutting through everything I thought I knew.
One stormy homecoming is going to do a great deal of harm.
You'll regret this marriage.
If most of the time it's like this.
Some days, yes. Some days, no. Maybe the truth is that I regret letting that whisper live rent-free in my head for so long. But I'll tell you this.
Got my dinner ready
Words
yet,
are
honey?
powerful. They can bless. They can curse. And sometimes, the loudest words are whispered. So tell me, if you were standing in my place walking down that aisle and your father whispered those words, would you have kept walking?